Hey folks, I never thought I'd be putting my business out there like this, but I could really use some advice. Let me lay out a bit of background before I get into the mess that's taken over my life. My wife, Sarah, and I have been married for 8 years. We've got 2 kids, Emma, who's 7, and Jake, who's 5. On the surface, things looked pretty solid. Sure, we had our share of ups and downs like any couple, but nothing ever felt too big to handle. At least, that's what I thought. The first cracks started to show about 6 months ago. Sarah began working late more often and spending her weekends out with friends. At first, I didn't give it much thought. I mean, everyone needs their space, right? But then she started acting strange with her phone, and that was out of the ordinary for her. She'd get these texts, laugh, and then quickly tuck the phone away when I walked by. I tried convincing myself I was just being paranoid. After all, trust is the cornerstone of any marriage, right? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One night, she came home later than usual, smelling like booze and perfume that definitely wasn't hers. She was in an oddly good mood, almost like a teenager who had just pulled off something sneaky. When I asked her about her night, she gave me this story about having drinks with coworkers, but it sounded rehearsed, like she had practiced it. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something didn't sit right. Then, a week later, things really started to unravel. I came home early from a work trip, hoping to surprise her. But instead, I walked into an empty house, no Sarah, no kids. I called her, and she answered sounding startled and a little irritated, saying she was out at the park with the kids. Odd thing was, she hadn't mentioned a word about it before I left. When she got home, she seemed flustered, like she wasn't expecting me to be there. The kids were all excited to tell me about their day, but Sarah looked like she'd seen a ghost. That's when I knew something serious was going on. From that point on, I started paying more attention. Too many things didn't add up. Too many stories felt like they were missing pieces. My gut was telling me something was wrong, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. So, one night while she was asleep, I went through her phone. That's when I found the texts, from some guy named Mark. My heart dropped. The messages were flirty, intimate, and there was no denying what was going on. She was cheating on me. The shock hit me like a ton of bricks. But after that, the anger set in. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I knew I had to be smart about it. I needed more proof. I needed to have a plan. For the next few days, I was like a zombie, barely functioning at work or with the kids. All I could think about was Sarah and how she had betrayed me. Every time I looked at her, all I saw was someone who had broken her vows and lied to my face. But I kept my cool. I had to be strategic. I started digging deeper into Sarah's digital world. I already knew her phone password, so I went through everything: texts, emails, even her social media. What I found made my blood boil. There were dozens of messages between her and Mark, each one more explicit than the last. They talked about meeting up, about things they did together, things she hadn't done with me in a long time. It was like reading a horror story I couldn't stop. But the worst part was how long this had been going on. The messages went back over a year. A whole year of lies. I felt like an absolute fool for not seeing it sooner. How could I have been so blind? I took screenshots of everything, knowing I'd need the evidence when the time came to confront her. But that wasn't enough. I had to know who this guy Mark was. A quick search of his number showed he was a co-worker of hers. Suddenly, everything made sense. All the late nights at work, all the weekends where she said she was working on projects. She wasn't at work. She was with him. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. It wasn't just the cheating that hurt. It was the lies, the complete disregard for our family. I kept thinking about our kids, Emma and Jake, and how this would tear their world apart. They adored their mom. And the idea of breaking their hearts ate me up inside. But I knew I couldn't just let this continue. I had to confront her, and I had to put an end to it. I decided to wait for the right moment. I wanted her to feel the full weight of what she'd done. I thought carefully about how I'd handle it. I needed to stay calm, to be in control. I didn't want her to see how much she'd hurt me. Then the opportunity came. Sarah had a girls' night planned, at least that's what she said. But I knew better now. I told her I'd take the kids to my parents for the weekend. She seemed almost relieved when I told her I was taking the kids. Honestly, a little too eager for us to leave. But what she didn't know was, I had no plans to go anywhere. That Friday night, I packed up the kids, acted like we were heading out, and drove around town for a bit. We grabbed some dinner, and after a while, I dropped them off at my parents' place. I told them Sarah and I needed to have a talk. They knew something was up but didn't push for details, and I appreciated that. With the kids safe, I drove back to our house, my heart pounding the whole way. I parked a few blocks away, quietly made my way back to the house, and let myself in without making a sound. I sat in the living room, waiting. Around midnight, Sarah came stumbling through the door. She looked a mess, smelling like booze and that cologne I now recognized as Mike's. She was laughing, obviously in good spirits, but her smile disappeared the second she saw me sitting there. "Where are the kids?" she asked, her voice shaky, like she wasn't sure if she should be scared or just confused. "They're safe," I replied, standing up slowly. "We need to talk." Her face turned pale as she kicked off her heels, wobbling a little. "What's going on, John?" she asked, trying to play it cool, but I could see right through her. I took a deep breath, trying to keep a lid on the storm of emotions tearing through me. "I know, Sarah. I know about you and Mike." Her eyes went wide, and she opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but nothing came out. She just stood there, frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. Finally, she managed to stammer out, "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me!" I shouted, my voice bouncing off the walls. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots of her messages with Mike. "I found these. I know everything." She stared at the screen, her face twisting with anger. "You went through my phone? How dare you invade my privacy?" I was floored. "Invade your privacy? You've been lying to me for over a year, cheating on me, and you're worried about privacy?" Her expression shifted from anger to defiance. "Yeah, I was with Mike." "So what? Our marriage was falling apart anyway. You never had time for me. You never listened. I found someone who actually cares." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't about to let her blame this on me. "That's a load of crap, Sarah. Sure, we had problems, but that doesn't justify what you did. You could have come to me. We could have worked on things together. But instead you chose to cheat." She crossed her arms, her eyes cold and distant. "Maybe if you were a better husband, I wouldn't have had to." It felt like I'd just been hit in the chest. Her callousness was unbelievable. "Is that really how you feel? That I'm the one to blame for your affair?" She shrugged, looking almost bored. "I don't know, John. Maybe it's both of us. But what's done is done. Where do we go from here?" I stepped back, trying to wrap my head around everything. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw her out of the house right then and there. But then I thought about Emma and Jake. They didn't deserve to get caught in the middle of this mess. They deserve better than a shouting match. "We go to counseling, Sarah. We try to fix this for the kids' sake." Sarah let out this bitter laugh. "Counseling? You really think that's gonna fix anything?" I sighed, feeling completely drained. "I don't know, but we owe it to our kids to try." She looked at me for a long moment before finally letting out a heavy sigh. "Fine. We'll try counseling, but don't expect miracles, John." As she walked past me to head upstairs, I felt a strange mix of anger, sadness, and somewhere deep down, a faint glimmer of hope. I didn't know if our marriage could survive this, but I knew I had to try, if only for the sake of our family. That night felt like just the beginning of what would turn out to be a long, painful journey. The days after that confrontation were some of the hardest I've ever lived through. Sarah and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was awkward and tense. I slept in the guest room, not wanting to be anywhere near her. The kids could tell something was off, but I did my best to keep things normal for them. It wasn't their fault their mom had torn our family apart. We started counseling the next week. Our therapist, Dr. Adams, was a calm, middle-aged woman who seemed genuinely invested in helping us. During that first session, she asked us to talk about how we were feeling and what we thought the state of our marriage was. Sarah came out defensive right from the start. "I just feel like John stopped caring a long time ago," she said, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. "He was always working, always too busy. Mike made me feel alive again. I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept my cool. I was working to support our family, Sarah. I thought we were a team. You never once told me you were unhappy. You betrayed me," I said, my voice trembling. Before the argument could spiral, Dr. Adams stepped in. "It's clear there's a lot of pain here, John. It's important to recognize Sarah's feelings, even if you don't agree with what she did. And Sarah, you need to acknowledge the depth of John's hurt." Sarah rolled her eyes but muttered, "I'm sorry, John. I didn't mean to hurt you." Her apology felt empty, but I nodded anyway. "I'm sorry too, Sarah. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you like you needed, but you should have told me." We kept going to therapy, but progress was slow, almost crawling. Sarah seemed distant, like her heart wasn't in it, while I was wrestling with waves of anger, betrayal, and sadness. I wanted to fix things for the kids, but it was getting harder to see how that was even possible. A few weeks into the counseling, I came home one evening and found Sarah on the phone. The second she saw me, she hung up quickly, a guilty look flashing across her face. My stomach sank. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, already fearing the worst. "Nobody," she said, a little too fast. "Just a friend." I didn't believe her for a second. "Was it Mike?" She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "He just wanted to see how I was doing." "It's nothing, John. Nothing." I felt anger bubble up inside me. "You're still talking to him? After everything?" Sarah's expression hardened. "He's a friend, John. I needed someone to talk to." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "We're supposed to be fixing our marriage, Sarah. How can we do that if you're still in contact with the man you cheated on me with?" She looked away, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't think." "You didn't think?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "You didn't think about me? About the kids? About any of this?" Tears started to spill from her eyes, but I was numb. "You need to make a choice, Sarah. It's either him or us. You can't have both." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I'll stop talking to him. I promise." But her promises meant little to me now. It felt like I was looking at a stranger. The woman I had loved and trusted was gone, replaced by someone I wasn't sure I could ever forgive. That night, lying in the guest room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was fighting a battle I'd already lost. Maybe some things were just too broken to fix. But for Emily and Jake's sake, I knew I had to try. As the weeks dragged on, Sarah kept her promise, or at least she said she did. She stopped contacting Mike, but I couldn't stop the suspicion from gnawing at me. I was still on edge, questioning every move she made. Trust, once shattered, doesn't come back easily. Dr. Adams encouraged us to spend more time together, to try to reconnect. We started going on dates again, trying to remember what had brought us together in the first place. One Friday evening, Sarah suggested we go out to dinner at a nice restaurant. I agreed, hoping it might be a fresh start for us. We dropped the kids off at my parents' place and headed out. At first, things were fine. We talked about lighter stuff, reminisced about the early days of our relationship. For a brief moment, it almost felt like things could actually get better. But as the night wore on, Sarah's mood started to change. She grew distant, her answers shorter, and she kept glancing at her phone. I tried to ignore it, but the uneasy feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. "Everything okay?" I asked, doing my best to sound casual. "Yeah, just tired," she replied, but her eyes said something else. The drive home was filled with an uncomfortable silence. When we got back, Sarah went straight to bed without saying a word. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the wall, feeling more isolated than ever. Was this really what our marriage had come to? The next morning, Sarah was unusually quiet. I tried to make small talk, but she was distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. The kids could sense the tension, keeping to themselves. I decided to take them out for a while, hoping to give Sarah some space and clear my own head. We went to the park, and for a few hours, I was able to forget about the mess back home. Emma and Jake's laughter was like a temporary break from the pain in my chest. But as we drove back, the familiar dread crept in, knowing I was heading back into that tense, suffocating atmosphere. When we got home, I found Sarah in the kitchen, her eyes red and puffy. She'd been crying. My heart sank. "Sarah, what's going on?" I asked softly. She looked up at me, tears welling up again. "I don't know, John," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can do this anymore." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling a lump form in my throat. She wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "I thought I could fix this, but I don't know if I'm strong enough. The guilt is eating me alive. Every time I look at you, all I can see is the pain I've caused." "We can get through this," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "It's gonna take time, but we can make it work." Sarah shook her head slowly. "I don't know if I deserve another chance. Maybe you and the kids would be better off without me." I grabbed her hands, forcing her to look at me. "We're a family, Sarah. The kids need you. I need you. We can't just throw this away." She broke down, sobbing like I'd never seen before. I held her close, trying to comfort her, but inside, it felt like I was holding on to something slipping right through my fingers. For the first time, I truly understood the weight of her guilt, and how much she was struggling to face the mess she had created. That night, we talked for hours. It was raw, painful, but the most honest conversation we'd had in a long time. We laid it all out, our fears, our hopes, and the love we still had for our kids. By the end of it, we both knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we also knew we had to try. Not just for the kids, but for each other. The next morning, we woke up with a new sense of purpose. It wasn't some magical fix, but it was a step in the right direction. We made a commitment to focus on rebuilding our trust and finding a way back to each other. It was going to be a long, hard road, but for the first time in a while, it felt like there was a light at the end of the tunnel. The weeks that followed were some of the toughest we had ever faced. We both tried, but the trust that had been shattered was difficult to rebuild. Dr. Adams kept guiding us through our therapy sessions, urging us to be open and honest with each other. Sarah was putting in the effort. I could see her trying. She was more present with the kids, more attentive to me. One day, she suggested we take a weekend getaway, just the two of us, to reconnect. I agreed, thinking a change of scenery might help us rediscover what had brought us together in the first place. We booked a cabin up in the mountains and arranged for my parents to watch the kids. The drive was quiet, but not awkward. We made small talk, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. The cabin was beautiful, surrounded by tall trees and the peaceful sounds of nature. We spent the first day hiking and soaking in the calm of the mountains. That evening, we sat by the fireplace, sipping wine and talking. Sarah opened up about how guilty she felt and how hard she was trying to make things right. "I'm so sorry, John," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even imagine. I'm trying to be better, for you and the kids." "I can see that," I said, squeezing her hand. "And I appreciate it. But it's gonna take time, Sarah. We both need to be patient." That night, we went to bed holding each other. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was a small, meaningful step toward healing. The rest of the weekend went well, and by the time we headed back home, I felt more hopeful than I had in months. But reality hit hard once we returned. The kids were thrilled to see us, and life quickly slipped back into its usual routine. Still, there was an underlying tension I couldn't shake. I found myself checking Sarah's phone now and then. Nothing suspicious came up, but the paranoia lingered. Trust, once broken, isn't easy to rebuild. About a month after our trip, Sarah came home from work one evening, looking unusually tense. I could tell something was on her mind, but she didn't say anything during dinner. After we got the kids to bed, I decided to ask. Sarah, is everything okay? You seem off tonight. She hesitated, biting her lip. There's something I need to tell you, John. My heart sank. What is it? She took a deep breath. Mike reached out to me today. He wanted to apologize and asked if we could still be friends. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. And what did you say? I told him no, she said quickly. I told him I'm working on my marriage, and I can't have any contact with him. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign that she was lying. She seemed sincere, but the fact that Mike had reached out at all rattled me. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want to be honest with you, John, she said, her voice soft. I don't want to keep any more secrets. I'm committed to us, and I need you to know that. Her words were reassuring, but the fear of another betrayal still hung in the air. I appreciate you being honest, Sarah, but you have to understand how hard this is for me. Every time something like this happens, it brings all the hurt right back. She nodded, tears rolling down her face. I know, and I'm so sorry. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm serious about fixing this. We hugged, a fragile peace settling between us. The next few days were tense but manageable. We kept up with counseling, trying to focus on the progress we were making, no matter how small. Then one afternoon, Sarah came home from work earlier than usual, a worried look on her face. John, we need to talk. I braced myself, already expecting bad news. What now? I think someone's been following me, she said, her voice shaking. There's been a car parked near my office and outside the house. It's there too often for it to just be a coincidence. A chill ran down my spine. Did you get a good look at who's driving? She shook her head. No, I haven't, but I've got a really bad feeling about this. The thought hit me like a truck. What if it's Mike? I hadn't considered it, but it made sense. He might be upset that Sarah cut him off and was trying to intimidate her. We need to call the police, I said firmly. Sarah nodded, looking relieved that I believed her. I'll do it first thing tomorrow. That night neither of us slept well. The fear of being watched lingered, making it hard to relax. We were trying so hard to move forward, but it felt like the past wasn't done with us yet. Lying there in the dark, I realized our journey was far from over, and the challenges ahead might be even tougher than what we had already faced. The next morning, Sarah called the police to report the suspicious car. They took her statement seriously and promised to patrol the neighborhood more frequently. We decided to stay on high alert, keeping the kids close, double-checking all the locks, and making sure nothing was out of place. The following days were tense and nerve-wracking. I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, my paranoia growing stronger. Sarah was visibly on edge too, jumping at every little sound. All the progress we had made in trying to rebuild trust and find a sense of normalcy was being chipped away by this new threat. Then one evening, while we were getting ready for bed, Sarah's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and I saw her face go pale. It's Mike, she whispered, showing me the caller ID. Answer it, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. Put it on speaker. She hesitated but eventually answered. Hello, Mike, she said firmly. What do you want? Rachel, we need to talk, came his voice, sounding more desperate than threatening. Please just hear me out. There's nothing to talk about, Mike, Sarah said, her tone cold and steady. I told you I'm trying to fix my marriage. You need to stop contacting me. Please, he pleaded. I'm sorry for everything. I just want to explain myself. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the phone from Sarah, unable to contain my anger. Listen, Mike. You need to leave my wife alone. If you come near her or our family again, I'll go straight to the police. Do you understand me? There was a long pause on the other end. I understand, he finally said. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I'll stay away. I hung up, my hands shaking with rage. This has to stop, Sarah. We can't keep living like this. I know, she said, tears welling up again. I'll block his number. I'm so sorry, John. I never wanted any of this. The next few days were spent trying to regain some sense of normalcy. Sarah blocked Mike's number and deleted all his contact information. I stayed vigilant, keeping an eye on our surroundings, hoping the increased police presence would put an end to the harassment. About a week later, Sarah and I were sitting on the couch, watching a movie after the kids had gone to bed. For the first time in a while, things felt almost normal. But then we heard a loud crash outside. We both jumped, my heart immediately racing. I grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and motioned for Sarah to stay inside. I stepped out onto the porch, scanning the darkness, my pulse pounding in my ears. My eyes landed on the source of the noise. A brick wrapped in paper had been thrown through our living room window. I picked it up, my hands trembling, and carefully unwrapped the paper. Scrawled in angry, messy handwriting were the words, "This isn't over." Sarah appeared at the door, her face pale. "What is it, John?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I handed her the note, my mind racing with fear and anger. "He's not giving up," I said, my voice tight. "We need to call the police again." The police arrived quickly, took our statements, and promised to increase patrols around the house. Their reassurances helped, but it didn't do much to ease our nerves. That night, neither Sarah nor I slept. We took turns watching the front door, the weight of everything pressing down on us like a heavy blanket. The next day, I decided I couldn't just sit around anymore. I installed security cameras around the house and put up motion sensor lights. Sarah was still scared, but she did her best to stay strong for the kids. We both knew that living in constant fear wasn't helping us rebuild our marriage. A few nights later, the security cameras picked up footage of someone lurking around our property. When the police reviewed it, they identified the man. It was Mike. They arrested him for harassment and violating the restraining order Sarah had filed. The relief we felt was overwhelming, but the damage had already been done. The fear, the tension, it had taken a toll on both of us. In the days that followed, Sarah and I had several long conversations. We talked about everything, our fears, our hopes, and the mistrust that still lingered between us. The ordeal with Mike had shaken us to the core, but it also forced us to confront our issues head-on. "John," Sarah said one evening, her voice trembling, "I want us to start over. I know I've made some terrible mistakes, but I'm committed to making this work, for us and for the kids." I looked into her eyes, searching for sincerity. I saw it, mixed with guilt and determination. "I want that too, Sarah," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But it's going to take time. We need to be patient with each other and rebuild what we've lost." We both knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in months, I felt a small glimmer of hope. We had faced a nightmare and somehow come out the other side, a little battered, but still standing. Maybe, just maybe, we could heal and move forward together. With Mike behind bars, the tension in our house began to ease. The kids seemed more relaxed, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah and I started to find a sense of normalcy. But the journey to rebuild our marriage was far from over. Dr. Adams continued to guide us in therapy, and in one session, she suggested we each write down what we appreciated about one another and our hopes for the future. Sarah and I exchanged our lists, and it was surprisingly emotional. Seeing, in writing, the reasons we fell in love and the dreams we once shared brought us closer together. As we worked on reconnecting, we also focused on creating new memories. We planned family outings and date nights, trying to recapture the magic that had drawn us together in the first place. One weekend, we decided to take the kids on a camping trip. Emma and Jake were over the moon, and their excitement was contagious. The trip turned out to be a success. We hiked, fished, and roasted marshmallows by the campfire. For those few days, it felt like the shadow of the past had finally lifted. Sarah and I shared moments of real connection, laughing and talking late into the night while the kids slept in the tent. Back home, daily life resumed, but there was a noticeable shift between us. Sarah was more open, more engaged, and I made a conscious effort to be more present and attentive. Trust was slowly being rebuilt, brick by brick. A few months after the camping trip, Sarah and I were sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sunset. The kids were playing in the yard, their laughter filling the air. It was one of those rare, peaceful moments where everything felt right. "John," Sarah said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. "I need to tell you something." My heart skipped a beat. The last time she'd said those words, my world had been turned upside down. "What is it?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I want to renew our vows." Her words caught me off guard. I hadn't seen this coming, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Renewing our vows could be a way to symbolize our commitment to each other and our family. A fresh start. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said, reaching for her hand. We started planning the vow renewal ceremony together, keeping it small and intimate with just close family and friends. The kids were thrilled, especially Emma, who loved the idea of being a flower girl. As the date approached, I found myself reflecting on the past year. The pain, the betrayal, the fear, everything we had been through. It had been a tough road, but somehow, we had managed to keep moving forward. But along with all the memories of our struggles, I also thought about how far we had come. The progress we'd made, the healing we'd started. Sarah had shown real remorse and a genuine commitment to making things right, and I had worked hard to let go of the anger and resentment that had once consumed me. The day of the ceremony arrived, and it was perfect. We picked a quiet spot in a nearby park, surrounded by blooming flowers and the peaceful hum of nature. Emma and Jake stood by our sides, their faces glowing with happiness as Sarah and I held hands in front of our closest family and friends. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a deep sense of peace. We recited our vows, promising to love and honor each other all over again. The words carried so much more weight this time, reflecting everything we'd been through. "I love you, John," Sarah said, her face streaked with tears. "Thank you for giving us another chance." "I love you too, Sarah," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "Here's to our new beginning." We sealed our vows with a kiss, and the people we cared about most cheered for us. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about the future. We still had a lot of work ahead of us, but I knew we were finally on the right path. That night, as we lay in bed, Sarah snuggled up close to me. "Thank you, John, for everything." I kissed her on the forehead. "We're in this together, Sarah. Always." As I drifted off to sleep, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: contentment. Our marriage had been tested in ways I never could have imagined, but we had come through the storms stronger. We had found a way to move forward, and for that, I was grateful. In the months following our vow renewal, life gradually settled into a new normal. Sarah and I kept up with our counseling sessions with Dr. Adams, continuing to work on our communication and trust. We both understood that healing wasn't an overnight process, and we were committed to seeing it through. One afternoon, I came home from work to find Sarah sitting on the porch, a thoughtful expression on her face. She smiled as I sat down beside her, but I could tell something was weighing on her mind. "Hey, what's up?" I asked gently. She sighed, running her hand through her hair. "I've been thinking a lot about us and everything we've been through. I know we've made a lot of progress, but there's something I need to tell you." I felt a familiar pang of anxiety. "What is it?" Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with sincerity. "I've been offered a promotion at work. It's a great opportunity, but it would require me to travel a lot. I'm worried about what it might mean for us and our family." I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. The thought of her being away so often unsettled me, but I didn't want to stand in the way of her career. "How do you feel about it?" "I'm excited, but I'm also scared," she admitted. "I don't want to jeopardize everything we've worked so hard to rebuild. I want to make sure we're strong enough to handle this." I reached for her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "Sarah, I believe in us. We've come a long way, and as long as we communicate and stay committed, I think we can handle anything. If this promotion is what you want, then I'm behind you 100%. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Thank you, John. That means the world to me." Over the next few weeks, we talked through how we'd manage her new schedule. We made plans for regular video calls and set aside time for family activities whenever she was home. It wasn't going to be easy, but we were determined to make it work. Sarah accepted the promotion, and soon, her new role began. The first few trips were challenging, but we stayed connected, and the kids adapted surprisingly well. They were proud of their mom, and I did my best to keep everything running smoothly at home. One evening, while Sarah was away on a business trip, I got a call from her. She sounded excited but nervous. "John, I've got something to tell you," she said. "What is it?" I asked, curious. "I've been asked to give a keynote speech at an upcoming conference," she said, her voice tinged with both excitement and fear. "It's a huge honor, but I'm terrified." "Sarah, that's amazing!" I exclaimed. "You're going to do great, I have no doubt about it." Her voice softened. "I just wish you could be here with me. I miss you." "I miss you too," I said. "But I'll be cheering you on from home. You've got this." The night of her speech, the kids and I gathered around to watch a live stream of the event. Sarah looked poised and confident, delivering her speech with grace and passion. I couldn't have been prouder. When she called me afterward, she was elated. "I did it, John. I really did it. I knew you would," I said, smiling. "You're incredible, Sarah." Sarah's trips became more frequent, but instead of pulling us apart, they brought us closer. We made the most of the time we had together, and I found myself falling in love with her all over again. Despite the distance, our bond grew stronger. One weekend, Sarah surprised me with a spontaneous trip to a nearby city. She had arranged for my parents to watch the kids, giving us some much-needed alone time. We explored the city, trying out new restaurants and visiting local spots. It was a wonderful break from the everyday routine, reminding me just how much I cherished our moments together. As we sat in a cozy cafe, sipping coffee and watching the world go by, Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "John, thank you for standing by me through everything. I know it hasn't been easy, but your support means the world to me." "I love you, Sarah," I said, my heart full. "We've been through hell and back, but we're stronger because of it. I wouldn't trade what we have for anything." She smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I love you too, John. Here's to us and our future." Our relationship wasn't perfect, but we had learned to face challenges together. We were a team, and that made all the difference. Every day felt like a testament to our resilience and commitment. We had faced darkness and come out the other side, ready to take on whatever the future held. Time passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Sarah's travels became part of our routine, and we continued to adapt and grow together. The kids were thriving, and our bond as a family felt stronger than ever. We still saw Dr. Adams for counseling, making sure we stayed on track and addressed any issues that cropped up. One evening, as Sarah and I enjoyed a quiet dinner at home, she reached across the table and took my hand. "John, there's something I've been thinking about a lot lately." My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face calm. "What is it?" She smiled, a mix of excitement and nervousness in her eyes. "I think we should move. A fresh start for all of us. New place, new memories." I was surprised but intrigued by the idea. "Where were you thinking?" "I found a house in a small town about an hour away," she said, pulling out her phone to show me pictures. "It's beautiful. Big yard for the kids, plenty of space for us. I think it could be a great new beginning." The house looked perfect, charming, with a large backyard and enough room for Emma and Jake to play. The thought of leaving behind the place where so much pain had unfolded was appealing. "It looks great," I said, feeling a spark of excitement. "Let's do it." The kids were just as enthusiastic, and within a few months, we were settled into our new home. The change of scenery brought a sense of renewal and hope. We spent weekends exploring the town, meeting our new neighbors, and building fresh memories. One day, while unpacking boxes, I came across an old photo album. Flipping through the pages, I was reminded of all the good times Sarah and I had shared before things went wrong. That evening I showed it to her, and we spent hours reminiscing about our early years together. "Look at us," Sarah said, pointing to a picture of us on our honeymoon. We were so happy. We still can be, I said, pulling her close. We've come a long way, and I believe our best days are still ahead. Sarah nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Thank you, John, for never giving up on us. As we continued settling into our new life, we focused on strengthening our relationship and building a future together. Sarah's career continued to thrive, and I found new opportunities in our new town. The kids loved their new school and quickly made friends. One evening, we hosted a small gathering with our new neighbors. As we sat around the fire pit in our backyard, laughter and conversation filled the air. Sarah and I exchanged a look, both of us feeling grateful for the fresh start and the new connections we were making. After everyone had left and the kids were in bed, Sarah and I sat on the porch, soaking in the quiet of the night. I feel like we're finally where we belong, she said, resting her head on my shoulder. Me too, I replied, wrapping my arm around her. We've been through so much, but it's made us stronger. As the months turned into years, our love continued to grow and evolve. We had weathered the storms, and now we were enjoying the peace that came with truly understanding and supporting one another. The future looked bright, and for the first time in a long while, I was excited to see where it would take us. We faced challenges, but we faced them together, always committed to our family and to each other. Our journey had been tough, no doubt, but it had also changed us in ways we never expected. Looking back, I realized that Sarah's betrayal had almost torn us apart, but in the end, it forced us to confront our issues and rebuild our marriage on a much stronger foundation. We had learned the hard way about the importance of communication, trust, and unwavering support. It wasn't easy, but it brought us closer than we'd ever been before. One night, as we lay in bed, Sarah turned to me and whispered, "I'm so grateful for you, John. You gave me a second chance, and I promise I'll never take that for granted." I smiled, pulling her close. "I love you, Sarah. We're in this together, now and always." As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. Our journey had been tumultuous, full of ups and downs, but it had led us to a place of real love and understanding. We had found our way back to each other, and I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it side by side, together.